Right.
What I will say in general is there's definitely a lot more than just the answers you give, but how you give those answers. So let's say I came up to you and I said, oh, tell me about yourself. My name's Brenden. I'm doing this, and this is what I love about this, what I care about. Kind of just like, dude, like, whoa, this guy's so fast. I don't understand what he's saying. But instead, if I said, it's great to be here today. Thanks for having me. My name's Brenden Kumarasamy, and I'm very excited to be applying for the position. If there's anything about me that you want to remember, notice how I'm like a lot calmer.
To the point where I actually, when you started talking about that, like I almost stepped in as like director, producer here and went, Brenden, I need you to slow down. Because you literally I almost stopped the show here for that thing and just say, man, I need you to slow down so that I can see how that would really be off-putting to somebody going like, stop, slow down.
Exactly. So there's two parts to this I want to emphasize. One is definitely what you say. Because what you say, this is going to be interesting for people, what you say gives you the confidence to know how to say it. Okay. What you say gives you the confidence to know how to say it. The same way how in sports, if you've done the drill 1,000 times, it gives you the confidence that you just can't get anywhere else. That allows you to make quick, timely decisions that might not have been what you practiced. Same thing here. The more you practice your answers to tell me about yourself, the more confident you become. So then you can spend a lot more time figuring out how to communicate in a way that's compelling. So the first version of your tell me about yourself is going to be met with a lot of criticism. The way that you speak it's going to be horrible. The way you structure it's going to be bad. But then after 2 weeks, not like 2 years, 2 weeks of just doing this every day, it's going to sound like 100 times better. I'm not even exaggerating.
Sure.
Because you just know the structure. There's only so much you can talk about yourself. Like there's only a certain amount of words, and tell me about yourself. It's not a 30-minute monologue here. It's like a minute and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Max. It's probably 30 seconds, 45 seconds. So you're going to master at some point. And then in the second part, when you get the words straight, that already gives you a newfound confidence. You're like, wow, my tell me about yourself is way better than what it was before. And then the second part is more challenging, but now you have the confidence to tackle it. Is now, how are you doing this? Well, Brenden, you didn't pause between point 1 and point 2. Well, Brenden, you don't look excited when you talk about yourself. Because if you start your presentation going like this, well, yeah, my name is Brenden and I'm passionate about this. Well, I don't really look too excited, am I?
Right, just straight-faced.
Yeah, if I go, my name's Brenden, I'm really excited to be here. I look excited. It's great. And then over time what happens is then how you say it also gets better. And that one question that you master trickles down, all the communication skills that you mastered in that one thing trickles down to every other question they can ever ask you.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, we're kind of winding to the end of the stuff I had prepared here. So the final question I'd like to ask you is kind of a two-parter. Brenden, in your opinion, what is the biggest problem or challenge with the job market today? And I'll ask you the second part as well. How do we fix it?
Right. I would say the biggest problem with the job market today is probably mindset. And what I mean by mindset, and I know it's easy for me to say that having a job.
Right.
But what I will say is in 2019 when I applied for IBM, the reason why I had so much anxiety, the reason I prepped so much is because I knew a recession was coming. I never went through a recession. No, I don't know what hard times are like. I just knew it was coming, so I knew I needed to secure a job. Did I expect Corona to happen? No, definitely not.
I did. No.
But I knew that I wanted to have a secure job before something happened. I didn't know what it was, and it just ended up being, a year and a half after I signed my offer. So my timing, I just got lucky with that. But What I didn't get lucky with, right, that was entirely me, was the mindset and how I approached that interview. Even if times were good in 2019. Times were incredible. It was the best job market in the history of America, essentially, in Canada. Unemployment was like 3% or something, and especially in high skills work. So but I still went into that interview like it was do or die. To be frank, if I lost my job tomorrow, though I don't think is likely, because I've done everything it is to make sure I don't. But if I do, I would cry about it for a week. But after a week, I would say it's game time. Let's get back into it. I think what's missing for most candidates is the mindset component of saying, I can actually do this. I can actually figure it out. I can't even talk to people in a coffee and one-on-one. How am I supposed to figure this out? How we fix it, which is going to be a weird response coming from me, is you don't. You take advantage of it. right?
Ooh,
You don't try and fix the
okay.
mindset. You take advantage of the fact that 90% of people are going to struggle in virtual interviews, and 90%, 95% of people are going to struggle to even have a conversation over Zoom. You exploit it, because right now what you want to do is you want to take advantage of everyone you can do. What I tell people is always be selfish first, get your chips in order, and then help other people. I never would have started MasterTalk until I had my needs met. Now I can focus on helping the world, doing podcasts like this for free, helping people, adding value after I won. You need to focus on your win first. But, because I know I sound very intense and competitive, the best way of doing that is not alone. Right?
Got it.
Get
So
a group of people.
back to that group.
Right. Go find the people who believe that what you believe are in that 5%, who are willing to go getters, get the stuff that they need. Promise you'll all be successful. Every single person, without a doubt, that helped me get the job that I have, has a job right now.
Really?
And if they didn't, I would be the first person to recommend them to my company, right? And that's the key. When you have those 5%ers who are willing to think like you didn't push for the game, I don't see how you lose. I honestly don't.
Wow. And that I think we've had powerful stuff from you today, my friend. We really have. So we're winding down, and there are so many takeaways. Like the show notes for this are going to be bananas. They really are. And actually, you know what? I don't want to say speaking of bananas, but I made myself a little note up here. You mentioned hippos and nail polish, and that was my last written question. But what did you mean by that? I hate teasing things and then never closing them out. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. So what I meant by that is one exercise you can practice public speaking with that will really give you a lot of mindset. We can demonstrate this. It's called the random word exercise.
Sure.
Where you essentially give yourself a random word and you present something out of thin air. So why don't we just practice this right now, Rob? Why don't you just give me a random word?
Let's go with paint.
Paint, sure. Awesome.
Paint.
I like to do a lot of things with my life, whether it's arts and crafts, whether it's being on a podcast like this. And in that same way, creativity can be expressed in different ways. But there's one skill in particular that drives my creativity the most. And no, it's not writing. No, it's not making videos on YouTube, but it's to paint. Painting is an incredible way of showcasing your creativity. Whether it's the canvases we paint on a piece of paper to the canvases we make, and the bigger canvases that we create, to the painting that is our very masterpiece of our lives. What I challenge you all to think about is not just painting as a verb or painting as a way of expression, but painting as a way of being. Don't let other people paint your canvas. Paint your own. Be the own masterpiece of what you were meant to be, and share your paintings with the world. So notice how I just said something completely random here. The point that I'm driving.
But it wasn't random. There was definitely stuff. And go ahead. Three things.
Right. 3 things. 1, never compare yourself to me. I've done this 2,000 times. I'm like a slave on podcasts. I keep doing it over and over again because I need a demonstration, or else people won't know what the benchmark is. Number 2, all I'm asking for is 5 minutes of your day. Every day, 1 word, 1 minute. So 5 words, 1 minute. Lamppost, wife I'm arguing with, tree, floor, cupboard, 1 minute each. That's where the nail polish, all that stuff comes from. I got nail polish 2 weeks ago. So I started talking about beauty and how the definition of beauty, you can figure it out. Number 3, which is the most important thing. This seems ridiculous, but the implications are a lot more important than you think. The implications are as follows. If I could talk about hippos for a minute, if I could talk about nail polish for a minute, who cares about an interview? They're going to ask me things I already know. They're going to ask me about experiences I already did. They're going to ask me questions I've already been asked before. That very interview that you were scared of, that you were so afraid of, suddenly becomes a joke. And that's the point of the random word.
Got it. It's the almost like the sell me the pencil exercise, but slightly altered to be more ad-libbing. Got it. That's really cool. All right, now it's your turn, my friend. I'm out of stuff, and at the end of the show, every show that has a guest, we give you the opportunity to bring out some of those things that I didn't. I don't want to ever have you do my job for me, but there's probably a couple little things left over kicking around that I didn't ask you about, and we'd love the answers to those. So what didn't I ask you today, Brenden, about public speaking for work to help folks in their job hunt.
Absolutely. So I want to bring two things to the table here that I think are going to help a lot of people. One is most candidates don't prepare a good set of questions to ask at the end of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
Their questions are literally like, it's just a joke. Like, don't ask questions that everyone else is asking. Ask questions that only applies to the company. So for example, if you're applying to a company like IBM, don't just ask about, hey, like, what do you think is the biggest mistake that people make at the job, or blah, blah, blah. No, ask them stuff that's relevant to them. Hey, I heard about this initiative that you're working on right now at IBM and at your office specifically. Can you tell me more about that and how other consultants have gotten involved with this? Boom. Can you give me an example that demonstrates the culture well within the company? Bam. Now you're asking questions that are relevant, that are interesting, and that are unique. So prepare your set of questions and always fact check them with your friends, because you don't need 10. You need like 3 really good ones. And don't remember, this is a group exercise, people. If you don't know the questions, ask your friends to give you questions to use. It's right, not hard.
And that's saying somebody who maybe you already have an in with at the job, okay, use that resource.
I'll give you a super easy example. So I interviewed at PwC 3 years ago. This is a long time ago, and I got the job there. And I asked a really good question, which is as follows. Can you give me an example that demonstrates the culture of the company? That was really interesting. Like a specific example.
Great question.
And then my friend interviewed at PwC 3 years later, and I wasn't working there anymore. I was like, dude, use the question. Just use the same question. No one else is going to ask that. He asked the question. Recruiters are like, wow, that was a really good question. You got the job the next day. That's the point.
Okay.
Don't try and reinvent the wheel, people. Work as a team. Try and figure out questions that people aren't willing to ask and ask them. Number 2, this is the best career advice I ever got. So I was 19, and I started competing in cases. I did a competition with McKinsey, which, like we all know now, since the interview is like a really prestigious company. I thought it wasn't a big deal. I didn't really know what it was. And I met one of the senior partners there. Really impressive guy. He's like one of the youngest guys, and really super impressive. And he gave me the best piece of advice I'll never forget. He said, think like an executive on day one. And I asked him what he meant by that. He said, everything that you do, I don't care if you're an intern, I don't care if you're an entry level, I don't care if you're a manager, always think like the most senior executives in the company and pretend to be them. And that doesn't just mean in what you do, it also means who you surround yourself with. So when you start at a company, what most people do is they go, okay, Rob gives me tasks to do, I complete the task, I do a good job. What the really high performers do in any company is they understand the business, the organization. So when an executive gives them work to do, they're not afraid to say, how does this apply to the bigger picture of things? Because that's what an executive would ask. So when I went into my interview process with IBM, the reason they gave me the job, yeah, sure, it was great with the presentation, but it was my questions that differentiated me from everyone else. I asked them questions that only an executive would ask. So things like, talking about client generation, how do you think about building relationships with big conglomerates within your client base, and how do you use that to generate new leads? And they looked at me dumbfounded because I was 21 asking these questions at the time.
Right, yeah. I didn't learn those questions until I was like 33.
Right, they were like triple or double my age, and they're just looking at me like, this guy understands the business. So when I started working, the first thing I did when I was on the job, I cold emailed a couple of senior executives at IBM, and I just said, hey, I'm Neo. Can I talk to you? They all gave me their time.
Really?
Because nobody else does it. I started meeting them. One question I asked them, you can steal, like I'm giving you all the golden nuggets, so I'm not competing anymore, right?
Love it. That's why you're here.
Right. That's why
you're not competing anymore.
Right, I'm not competing anymore. So the golden nugget is this question I asked an executive. I said, what's the best piece of advice you've ever given another executive? So the reason this is gold is because it prevents the dumb question they usually get, which is, what's the best piece of advice you have for me? Now it forces them to answer something that only an executive would know. Because I want to be an executive. Remember, think like an executive on day one. So what happened, and I started building a relationship with all of these executives 3 months in, and they treat me like an executive.
Interesting.
And I'm 23.
Right.
Does that make any sense? That's the point. In your jobs, in your interviews, when you have the job, because remember, part of the interview is when you also have the job. How do you make sure to keep thinking like an executive so that you're a value add to the company and not a detractor? And you'll never get fired.
Good deal. Good deal, man. I try to pull out like 3 things from every episode here. We may be pulling towards 6, 7, 8. I don't know, but either way,